Server 1 continues on from courses 02. Let's do this and do npm run dev 02. And if we look at our package JSON, we can see server dev 02 runs server 02. In fact, we want, pardon me, we want 1. Run that. Go to localhost. Come into the file, and we should have a query for it at the bottom here. If not, we can make one. Come into here, let's refresh this. Let's have a quick look at our docs. Yep, we got get task by ID, task user. So if we come here and go tasks, for example, run this, we get that. And what we're doing is in server 01, as we move into server 02, what we're basically doing is creating some resolver files. And if we look at index.js, we can see we import the user resolvers for task and user. And if we go into task.js, we can see we come up here, we brought across everything query, task, anything to do with task is in here, anything to do with users is in here. And basically we port them into index and export them out, so that when we come into server 02, for example, we can just import our resolvers. So this is one level of just importing resolvers into the file. So let's come back in here and do 2. And we can see we have a couple of queries here we can put in. Control C, come back in here, refresh this, the schema. There we go, we get all, we're resolving users and tasks. So this is a way we can abstract out the resolvers into separate files using index.js to pull all of them in, and we'll have all our separate ones that just contain anything to do with user or tasks here. So that is in server 02. And next in server 03, we're going to have a look at how we do that with our type definitions. So what we can do is if we go into server 03, one thing to notice in our index file here is we need to have something in our query and mutation. We can't leave these empty so it break. So sometimes we just use a blank placeholder just so it fills in. So if we come in here now, for example, and do server 03 and run that, it's looking good. And if we come into server 03 down here, we can see we've got a query again. We can run that just to check that that works. Come back in here, clear that, run in our query. That's good, prettify. So that's all working. So when we've come into here, when we come into our type definitions, in our index, we can basically have one place for our query, mutations, and anything else we want. We can't leave them empty. If we comment this out here, for example, it should break. So we can see that if we're doing this, so you could either do one query that you use and put the rest in another file, or you can just leave this as a blank placeholder that people know about this. Let's just change that there. So if we save that, then if we go into tasks, what we can do is we can extend these types. So we can extend type query. It doesn't have a type task in it, but by extending type query, extending type mutation, we don't need to do that for input. We don't need to do that for the type task because they're not in there. We don't need to have this here. If we look in users as well, we can see we're extending the type query. Type users not in there. When we look in our type definitions here, we can see that we can import these definitions and just extend the existing query mutations. Now what you might do is take one of these tasks out and put them in here in the index so that it's got something, but this would be basically a definition that you would use for your client, and you could just have a comment in there as we've seen before when we do 1 2 3. Come back, we can just sort of say placeholder there. But we won't do that, we'll leave that out, we'll just see, take that back, save that there. Let's go into our docs and we click on docs, and then we can see here, for example, what do we get? String scalar type. We would like to have some sort of comment definition. We saw that before, so let's come back in here, and this is where it goes, my mistake. Do that, place that in there, come back, refresh the schema, go into docs, string, go into this one here. That's comments not coming up. So if we come back here, what we can do is we can put like our comment here, just say placeholder. And when we come into our docs and we click on it here, it was up in the queries. We can see we have our comment here we can place. So this is a way that we can basically extend our queries and just have this in our server file, for example, and modularize all our definitions. There are other different ways too. And in the next video, we'll have a quick look at the merge schemas graph tool. And in fact, we'll do that now. Basically, it's much the sort of the same. We're importing in the merge types of our type definitions. And we have our client type, as we'd expect here. We have our product type, some definitions here. We merge them together using the GraphQL tools merge, pulling them in, exporting them out as an array, and we export the merge type defs that we get from the graph tools of our types here, so that they get imported here. And if we come in here and actually do a Control C and do CD merge types, merge schemas, and what we can do is node server.js. We can see it all is valid and fine. There's no kind of resolvers at the moment. We haven't put any resolvers in there, but we can see that the schemas are perfectly valid and sort of acceptable and everything running. So that's an example how you can use different tools if you want to merge them. So we've seen how we can do it with template literals. We can do it by how we can just basically extend our type definitions using the extend word here where appropriate for those that aren't already in there. So we can extend the type, extend the mutation, the type, everything can get imported in. They're not clashing with anything, and you wouldn't have a task in both places. So this is a way we can modularize our code to make it easier to work with.